Well, I want to add my word of thanks to have you here. It's good turnout for tonight. You don't know what to expect in a situation like this, but isn't this a beautiful facility? My, you are blessed in your community to have such a beautiful library, to stress the need for understanding and learning, and then to have a facility like this in it to use for this kind of a thing. It's a special blessing for me to be able to participate. So thank you for that. And I think probably it's the case that most of you here tonight are believers in God. I am. So I want to be very open about that. But I've also gone through periods in my life where I challenged my faith, and I continue to do that. And if there are those here tonight who are uncertain about God and about belief in God, or who maybe even have declared that you don't believe there is a God, I just want to thank you for being here, because it means you're willing to listen and think about this topic and examine evidence as well. That's what we're about tonight. So thank you for that. And it's also being recorded, I understand. And I might give a little plug for your techie guys. I'm not a techie guy. I'm old. So if it weren't for the techie guys, we'd be in big trouble, because this kind of a lesson has to have the technology. So you need to hug these two men and tell them you appreciate them, because they've done a lot of work already. So thank you for the privilege of being here. This is a neutral setting, the way I look at it. And in fact, I understand from this library that their policy is you're not supposed to have religious services in this facility. So that's perfect for what I do. Because the way I look at this is not a church service. This is a lecture class. You came tonight to hear a lecture. And a lecture in a classroom is different than a sermon in a church building. So this is not intended to be a sermon in a church building. So what I want to do is take just a few minutes at the beginning of this lesson to explain to you why it is appropriate for a church to sponsor some activity like this. So I'm going to read you two passages. First of all, let me tell you that the title for this lesson came from a book by Henry F. Schaeffer. And by the way, since this is a lecture and a class, you can answer my questions. And I'm going to expect audience participation. And I must say to you, I don't allow sleeping in my class. And I can see you. And I've been teaching a long time. So if I see some folks starting to nod their heads and get a fading out, we're going to do something about that, because I want your attention. Dr. Schaeffer is a chemistry teacher, chemistry professor. So anybody in this room know Henry F. Schaeffer? Never heard of him, right? He's only one of the most famous physical chemists in the whole world. But most folks don't know much about chemistry. I love chemistry. So if you don't love it, it's because you didn't have me. And I hope I share a little bit of that enthusiasm with you. Dr. Schaeffer is a phenomenal human being, a phenomenal scientist. He's won numerous awards. So if you get his little book, Science and Christianity, Conflict or Coherence, this is a book that's based on lectures he's given in college campuses and as a professor of chemistry in many places, that says there is no conflict between science and Christianity. And so it's rich. I'd highly recommend it to you. I'm going to be referring to a lot of books. You see several on the table. I will provide Emerson with a bibliography. Have I already done that?
I don't remember.
Okay. Did I send you a bibliography? Okay. So he already has it. So if you want to get these books, he'll have it, and the best ones have stars by them. But Dr. Schaeffer lists a whole host of people who are wonderful scientists, published, well-respected in the scientific community, who are fervent believers in God. I am one of them as well. I'm not as famous as these guys, but I am a fervent believer in God, and it's partly founded on the evidence of the natural world. So that's our subject for the evening. The Bible is the book upon which Christianity is based. In both the Old and New Testaments, the Bible proclaims, as in Psalm 19, that the heavens declare the glory of God. The firmament shows his handiwork. Day unto day utters speech, night unto night shows knowledge. The Old Testament teaches that nature testifies to God. The New Testament also teaches that. And I would say, from the standpoint of the church, Romans 1:20 is the theme passage for this series of lessons I'm going to teach you. It says, "For since the creation of the world, God's invisible attributes are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made." That passage teaches, class, that you can see God who is invisible. And how do you see him? You see him in the things that are made. It's the famous argument from design. Observation of nature is what science is all about, isn't it? Organized observation of nature is what the sciences do. This passage says, studying nature can lead you to believe somebody made that. That's the argument from design. So that's the argument I'm going to be using tonight and for the 2 lessons tomorrow, to which you're all going to return. I hope. Because there's so much to say. But that, ladies and gentlemen, is the only reference I intend to make to the Bible in this lecture. Because we're going to turn, class, to God's other book. He has another book other than this one. And I'll be returning to that book during this series. So thank you for allowing this brief introduction. Class, are you ready for science? And you should answer me enthusiastically.
Yes.
Thank you. Many key scientists in the days when really modern science was being invented, in the Renaissance, we call it, the Age of Enlightenment, most of the scientists in that time were believers in God. And also, I might add, that Jesus Christ is the Son of God and that the Bible is the Word of God. That was very common in those days. So, for example, Johannes Kepler, 1571 to 1630. How many of you have ever heard of Johannes Kepler? Maybe 3 people. I wish you knew him better. He was a great astronomer and mathematician. And kids, he didn't have calculators. He had to do math the hard way. Some of you are far enough along in your math that you're doing logarithms. The rest of you remember logarithms? Favorite subject in mathematics? He had to do heavy mathematics using only logarithms with no slide rules, no calculators. He was amazing. And he discovered the laws of planetary motion with what he had to do. Amazing. Here's a quote from him. "I was merely thinking God's thoughts after him. Since we astronomers are the priests of the highest God in regard to the book of nature, it benefits us to be thoughtful, not of the glory of our minds, but rather above all else of the glory of God." Don't you love that? He considered himself one who was thinking God's thoughts after him. I will tell you what was the concept of those men in those days. They felt like they were uncovering for the first time in the history of mankind what God's nature was really like. And they believed that God was speaking to them in the language of mathematics. He mentioned briefly, I was also a math teacher, folks, your other favorite subject. I taught calculus for 40 years. I always told my students, I'm not going there with you in this class, but if you were in my calculus class, the first day of class, I would tell you it's only the most important subject you will ever study in the math and sciences because it's the foundation. It deals with infinity, class.
And it helps you study infinity, which is only thinking God's thoughts. You'll never get closer to thinking God's thoughts than when you're dealing with infinity. In addition to that, if you can describe something in the natural world mathematically, you've reached the peak of the sciences. That's why they call math the queen of the sciences. So, have I given you enough of a build-up about math and science? What we're going to be doing is studying God's other book. And I would tell you, my concept is, in the last 100 years, it's as if He's thrown open the floodgates of things we have learned that we never knew before about His nature. And that's what I hope to excite you with. When you leave after my third lecture, and you're coming to every one of them, I want you to walk out of here absolutely stupefied by the majestic God who made us. That's my goal. He was. And how about this one? Now, tell me you've heard of Isaac Newton. I hope only the greatest scientist who ever lived, in my view. I have a very prejudiced view about that because he is the person who independently invented the calculus and helped show how to apply it to answer practical problems. Folks, you can't solve thousands of natural world problems without the calculus. And he invented it as well as showing how to use it. But he also did lots of other things. He formulated the classical laws of motion. You remember his 3 great laws of motion? Probably had that somewhere along the line. He is the one who invented the universal law of gravitation, a mathematical expression of how gravity works, which, by the way, allows scientists today to send things to the moon and to the other planets. Same law that he learned about in the 1600s. He also built the first practical reflecting telescope. He pioneered studies of light and optics, and he was a theoretician as well as a practical solve problems guy. And here's one of the things he said in his most famous book, The Principia. Though these bodies, referring to the solar system, may indeed continue in their orbits by the mere laws of gravity, yet they could by no means have at first derived the regular position of the orbits themselves from these laws. Thus, this most beautiful system of sun, planets, and comets could only proceed from the counsel and dominion of an intelligent and powerful being. Whereupon, if I had the time, class, I could read you 2 paragraphs of glorifying God for the wonders of His nature, as He uncovered many secrets we'd never known before. And young people, if you were in college in the 1800s in England or in Europe, you would take this class. Natural theology was studied in every college class, every college system. Everybody studied natural theology. This is one of the most famous natural theology books. You see the subtitle, or Evidence of the Existence and Attributes of the Deity, collected from the appearances of nature. There was a whole college class on that. That's what you would have taken. By the way, we still teach that at the college where I was president, because it's as important as anything you'll ever study. Well, this was one of the most famous books by Dr. William Paley, and it started with the famous watchmaker argument. Have you heard that argument? If you found a watch lying on the ground, wouldn't you ask yourself, didn't somebody make that? Well, I'm coming back to that argument tomorrow afternoon, so I'm not wasting my time on it tonight. But it was the foundation for the class. After which he said, there's things in nature much more complicated than watches that testify to somebody made this. So how is it that from that time, which most of the world were believers in God, certainly the scientists were, to where we are today, where we would have Carl Sagan in the most famous science series ever put on television, would begin his Cosmos series with this statement: the cosmos is all that is or was or ever will be. In other words, there is nothing but the matter. That's all there is. The cosmos is it. Wouldn't that be depressing to you, that if the cosmos is all there is, or ever was, or ever will be? Carl Sagan honestly believed, he's dead now, he knows better now, but he honestly believed you could explain everything you see by only referring to the things you see and observe. It's scientific naturalism that has become the thing that scientists in the 21st century do. Scientific naturalism. Nature's all there is. And so men like Richard Dawkins, they call him one of the four horsemen of the new atheists. Christopher Hitchens, are these names you've heard of? Samuel Harris, Daniel Dennett, and Richard Dawkins. Those four are called the four horsemen of the new atheism. They are vocal, they are passionate, they are evangelistic, they want to convert you to atheism. Why anybody would ever want to do that is beyond me, but they do. And so I make no apology class for getting feisty and yelling sometimes to impress the point. He does it all the time, Richard Dawkins. And by the way, he's kind of ugly about it. And may I say something else about that? When you're discussing with somebody with whom you disagree, please, if you're a believer in God, don't be ugly back. We've got too much ugliness in this world, don't we? Have we lived through some horrendous ugliness just recently in our culture, where people think they have the right to kill somebody else because of what he thinks and what he speaks about? God forbid. Let's never be spoken of as a person who takes out his vengeance and anger on some other human being. Listen to Richard Dawkins, British evolutionary biologist and author, professor of the public understanding of science at Oxford in England. Is that a prestigious university? And they appointed him to be the spokesman for the sciences. I hope you'll see by the time I finish tomorrow afternoon, he's not a very good spokesman for that. He's very biased and ugly to those who don't agree with him. So in his book, The Selfish Gene, in 1976, he said, faith is blind trust. May I heartily disagree with that? There is no God believer anywhere that has good sense who says his faith is based on nothing. You just close your eyes and say, I believe it. That's not what that's about. I'm a believer in God because of the evidence. And the weight of the evidence is much more powerful to me than it is for nature explaining everything by itself. So no, it's not blind trust, but that's how Dr. Dawkins describes it. In the absence of evidence, shame on him. Even in the teeth of evidence. What does he mean by that? He means even when the evidence is against you, you still believe it. And that's exactly wrong. It is a process of non-thinking. Well, thank you very much, Dr. Dawkins. All of you people who are God believers, you're just non-thinkers. Would you say that's not very nice? For the professor of public understanding of the sciences to be saying, that's not very good. But it gets worse. He's now written a book called The God Delusion in 2006, in which he says all kinds of horrible things. If this book works as I intend, religious readers who open it will be atheists when they put it down. He's evangelistic, I told you. But listen to this. God is a delusion, a psychotic delinquent invented by mad, deluded people. Thank you, Dr. Dawkins. I don't think that's any one of you, and I certainly don't think that's what I am. But that's how he describes us as God believers. We're so deluded, we made up this psychotic being called God, and he believes it's dangerous. So do the communists, by the way. And they teach their children that if you're a believer in God, you're a menace to society. Well, folks, that is not science speaking. That's a biased human being. But he's represented as the public understanding professor for the world. That's why, class, I get angry sometimes about the way things are done and how things are said. So I ask your forgiveness if I get too feisty, but I don't make any apologies for being firm and passionate. So how did things change so radically in 200 years? To the point now, class, I will tell you, I have a degree from Harvard in science education. But if a professor is a professor of biology or chemistry or even mathematics in a big university, he's a student, he's wanting to get his degree. If he lets it be known that he's an open creationist, he will not get a degree. You listening to me? And if he's a professor and it becomes known he's a creationist, he will not get tenure because there will be enough professors that oppose him that he'll never get it. That's reality. How did we get to such a place when 200 years ago most of the scientists were proclaiming the glory of God? I'm going to give you a brief history lesson. Pierre-Simon de Laplace, Frenchman in the 17 and early 1800s, he thought he was the next Newton, Isaac Newton. He was far from it. But his comment was, nature with its matter, energy, and forces could produce and maintain our solar system. We have no need for a God hypothesis. Nature could have done all this by itself. So the study of astronomy moved toward not needing God. Geology, Charles Lyell of the 17 and 1800s. His book, Principles of Geology, was strongly important in that age. The subtitle is an attempt to explain the former changes in Earth's surface by reference to causes now in operation. Here was his thesis. You don't need anything to explain past geological formations except things that are happening right now. The key to past is the present. So everything in geology can be explained without God, natural causes. And then Charles Darwin came along, deeply influenced by Lyell's geology. Did this class, now tell me you've heard of Charles Darwin, right? There's anybody. There is no book that has been written that has had more impact on humanity than the Bible. But I think second is Charles Darwin's book on the origin of species. Because it's in that book, class, that he painted the picture that there's no need for a designer to account for the origin of species of life. Natural selection, acting on natural variation, accounts for the appearance of design. Get this, class. Darwin's point was, it sure looks like it's designed, but it isn't. Nature did it. Small-scale changes over millions of years, and you can account for anything. Are you with me? And Darwin's book shook the world. So you ask, how do we get there in 200 years? Certain key people who changed the thinking of humanity into thinking you don't need God. Perrin and Haldane came up with the hypothesis in the late 1800s and early 1900s, you don't need God to produce life from non-life either. Their hypothesis was the early atmosphere on Earth and the early conditions were so different that life could have come from non-life then, even though it can't now. And there's a whole lot behind that. But that theory became very popular in the 1900s as we explained God out of everything. So piece by piece, the need for God went away. And what came to be said, class, is that you folks who believe in God You just put him in the gaps of knowledge to fill in where you don't know what you're talking about. So it's called the God of the gaps. May I say to you very clearly, I don't believe in the God of the gaps. I believe in the God who is testified to by abundant evidence. The more we learn, the more we believe in God. Not fill in the gaps because we know so little. No, class. What I'm going to argue is the more we've learned, the more we see not just the appearance of design, but absolutely design itself over and over again. But this is what's happened. And so by the 1950s, class, when the Darwinian centennial came up, he published his book in 1859. So 1959 was 100 years later. It was the Darwinian centennial. Tell me you were alive in 59. Raise your hand. Make me feel better. Some of us were alive in 1959. I was in junior high school. And by the way, I had a science teacher in junior high school I'll never forget. Because that lady said to us kids, you need to think for yourself. And I want you to read stuff about science in the magazines and in the newspapers and listen to it in the news and bring it in and let's talk about it. And we would talk about it and she would undermine some of the stuff that was said, especially if it was against God. Never forget it. But it was a time, class, a heady time when science thought we're going to take over in the sciences and know everything about how everything came about. And I was told by professors at both Florida State and Harvard University, you Bible believers better get over it, because the more we learn, the less your supposed God is needed. And then you're going to be embarrassed. And I will tell you, it shook me. So I didn't know how to deal with that. Why do you think I've spent my life studying this subject and trying to share it with other people? So kids, here's one thing I want you to remember. You're looking at a fellow who's done studies in the science. I'm not a scientist, I'm a science teacher. And I know how to explain difficult things to people who don't understand it. And I've studied this stuff for 50 years, and I believe in God more strongly today than I ever have in my life. So don't be afraid of the sciences, kids. You dig in and keep your eyes open, and you'll see the magnificence of God like you've never seen it. I like it when you're shaking your head, yes. So I say it's time to revisit the argument from design. That's what this class is about. So class, all of this was introduction. You ready to do a little science now? I hope so. Here's a book I'd sure recommend to you. Stephen Meyer's book, this one, The Return of the God Hypothesis. And by the way, we've got different kinds of pointers these days. I have a laser pointer. Let me show you. I mean, this was pretty up to date. It forward slides, and it's got this nice pointer. You see that? But look what happens. That makes me so mad. Great pointer. I love the screen, but it only ruins my whole day. Okay, I got a pointer on here. Let's see what we can do with it. Is that neat? But it doesn't move like I want it to. It has its own mind. Almost. But there's the... I can't even hold it still. There you go. That's the book. Sometimes I go back to the really old style. I told him to have that ready just in case. This is a great book. And The Return of the God Hypothesis, what do you think it's taken from? How about Simon de Laplace? We have no need of the God hypothesis. Oh, yes, we do. And this whole book, this is his third in his trilogy. You see the others here. He deals directly with Laplace. And he shows that there are three scientific discoveries that reveal the mind behind the universe. Class, there's only two options. Either mind produced the universe or the universe produced mind. There are only two options. Which is more reasonable? It's hard to argue. But what God has done in the last century is unfold incredible amounts of evidence in the natural world that we have learned about that say there had to be mind first. And we call him God. So what are his three scientific discoveries? First, the universe, that is space, matter, and time. Listen to me, class. Space, matter, and time had a beginning. That's not what atheists say. They say matter's always been here. And matter accounts for what's here today. No, science is now teaching us there is overwhelming evidence from the sciences. Forget the Bible, which says in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. I'm not quoting the Bible to you. I'm quoting science to you. Science is now telling us overwhelmingly there was a beginning. That is a problem for an atheist. Because if there was a beginning to space, time, and matter, you got to account for where that came from somehow. Okay? And I say the most reasonable answer to that is there was mind that produced matter from nothing. But that's a fact, class. Look, I haven't said this yet, but I'm going to say it right now. I don't want you to accept one thing because I said it. I will tell you where I got it and where the evidence is, and you can go look for yourself. Are you clear with me on that? I'm not expressing this as if I'm the final answer, folks, but I'm trying to express fervently what I believe I've learned from a host of folks in looking at the evidence. And this is a biggie. It's not my topic for these 3 lectures because this is heavier than the other 2, and I choose not to do it here. The second one is this. The universe, our solar system, and Earth are remarkably fine-tuned to support life on Earth and have been since the beginning. That's the one I'm going to talk about to you tonight, in part. Thirdly, even the simplest forms of life at the biochemical level contain massive amounts of digital information. You see that underlined here in blue. Everywhere you look at the microscopic world, there's information. Thousands of pieces of information crammed into almost no space that are being used to produce and maintain an untold number of molecular machines and complex processes in every living thing down at the nano level. And we knew nothing about that when Darwin was alive. We didn't know much about it before 1950s. Class, you have lived through the last 75 years in which we've learned more about life at the biochemical level than in all the history of mankind before that. Put together. And you've lived through it. It's the most exciting time. But this is a fact. And what Meyer says is these 3 things have become overwhelming evidence that there's a God. I'm saying amen. So we're going to talk about this fine-tuning piece next. All right? So I refer you to another book written by an agnostic. Paul Davies is not a believer in God. But he's an honest man. And he says interesting things. The Goldilocks Enigma is his book. Kids, help me with Goldilocks. What was Goldilocks? She was a little girl who did what? Come on, don't make me wait. I don't have time. What did she do? Kids, anybody, speak up. I'm going to help you. She went out into the woods and went into the house of the three bears, right? And she got inside and sat down at the table, and there was a bowl of, and she took a bite of it, and that wasn't very good. She took a bite of that porridge, and it was too hot. Wasn't it? So she went over to the next bowl of porridge, took a bite of it, and it was
Too cold.
That's better. Thank you, adults, for helping us out. So then she went to the third bowl of pottage, which happened to be the one for Baby Bear, right? Took a bite of it, and it was?
That's right.
Okay. Class, that is the answer to my next 20 questions. What you just said. So when I ask you a question, almost all the time the answer is going to be?
Just right.
Thank you. So you're ready. Don't give me this weak nothingness. Why does he name this book The Goldilocks Enigma? Because he's asking, why is the universe just right for life? And it is. Not just life, but life on this earth and this planetary system. Why is it that it is just right? That's what this book's all about. Class, it is a fact that it is just right. And my job in the next few minutes is to explain to you in some detail how it is just right. I want you overwhelmed. It's no small matter. So here's a quote from Paul Davies. One of the most significant facts, arguably the most significant fact about the universe, is that we're part of it. I say amen. How'd we get here? Because we are the only beings that anybody knows anything about that's sitting around thinking about how did we get here? Okay? You may be similar to monkeys, but they're not sitting around thinking about how they got here. You're the only ones. So how did we get here? Good question. We either got here by natural causes or there was some mind behind this that created us. That's the only two answers. Everyone agrees that the universe looks as if it was designed for life. Did I say that? No, that's Dr. Paul Davies. He's an agnostic. But everyone agrees. Class, I'm not telling you something. This is like a court case where both lawyers agree on the facts. The question is, what do you do with it? Nobody disagrees that everything sure looks like it was designed. The evolutionists spend half their time trying to convince you that what looks like it was designed was not designed. Because it has to be that way if their position is right. The really amazing thing, Davies continues in an interview he had, is not that life on earth is balanced on a knife edge, but that the entire universe is balanced on a knife edge and would be total chaos if the natural constants were off even slightly. You see that? Let me see if I can point to that. Yeah. Off even slightly. You watch. In the 1960s, when I was in college, we had discovered some 12 characteristics of the cosmos and our solar system that sure looked like they were fine-tuned in the 1960s. By 2020, 5 years ago, at least 50 books had been published about that subject. They call it the anthropic principle. Anthropic is the word for humans. Anthropos. The anthropic principle says things sure look like they were designed for us. And it's the truth. at least 50 books. And Hugh Ross and his staff have looked at all those books and cataloged over 800 fine-tuned characteristics. Look at what he says, that are essential for any potential human life site in the observable universe. Now, class, if you were my jury and this was a court case, and I were going to try to convince you there was a God, I'd go right to this. And I would say to you, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, if I could show you 800 different things, and let's just modify, that number's probably a little high. Let's go 600, okay? 600 different things. You picture this, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. I've got a box here that creates universes. And it has 600 dials on it. You with me? And you have to have those dials on certain settings to create a universe. So you get all those settings, 600 of them, and you create this universe. And it's working beautifully. You take one of those dials and you change it 1/10,000,000th of an inch. And everything quits working. So you put that one back real quick. And you take another one over here and you turn it 1/10,000,000,000th of a foot. And everything quits working. That's exactly the way it is, class. Jury. The things I'm telling you about in the next few minutes, if you change them 1/9th little bit, you wouldn't be here. And nor would there be any system of living things like we observe. Don't believe me. I'm just telling you that's what we've learned. So let's give an example or two. Oh, I love this book. This is called God's Crime Scene by J. Warner Wallace. Parents, if you're going to get your first book about this, get this one. J. Warner Wallace. J. Warner Wallace is a cold case detective. You know what that means? He solves cases that nobody else has been able to solve. He grew up an atheist. His father is still an atheist. He wrote this book because he's become a believer. He wanted to convert his daddy. He hasn't done it yet, but that's why this book was written. And what he does is he takes the whole universe and treats it like a crime scene. And he uses the methods of a detective to uncover the secrets. It's a great book. You'd love it. So I'm going to share with you just a little bit of it. Chapter 2. Every chapter in this book is built around a case that he solved. All right? I'm going to read to you. I'm watching you. You're not allowed to sleep. Helen knew something was wrong when her daughter Carrie failed to answer the door. It was a bright summer afternoon. Carrie said she'd be home. Her car was parked in the driveway. Helen tried to peek in through the living room window, but the curtains were unusually drawn. Carrie never locked the back door, but when Helen walked into the backyard of the old house, she found the door locked and all the windows closed. Carrie wasn't like that. She usually left one badly worn rear window slightly ajar. Not this time. Helen began to panic. She knew Todd and Carrie had a tumultuous marriage, one that included physical violence. Todd had moved out, but Helen still feared for her daughter's safety. The couple had a child named Lexi, but the violence had only intensified since her birth. A week ago, Todd had threatened to kill Carrie, and just last night, Carrie had confided to her mother there'd been yet another fight. When Helen could not get Carrie to answer the door on this afternoon, she decided to call the police. So I'm not going to read all this to you, but the police came. They opened the door finally. There was gas in that house, so they had to get out. They brought the hazmat team, and they got everything cleaned up. But they found a bunch of things in the process, class. I want to tell you some specifics. There was a pocket door at the bottom of the stairwell. It was closed. She never closed that door. Responding officers found the door to the master bedroom closed and a pile of laundry laying up against the bottom of the door. Carrie would be embarrassed to have dirty laundry anywhere. Inside the bedroom, they discovered the source of the gas. Many years prior, the old house had been retrofitted with a gas heater that was mounted to the wall separating the bedroom from the upstairs hallway. The pilot light was out, but the gas valve was open. You listening, jury? As part of the later investigation, they discovered from the gas company that Todd had turned off the gas service for lack of payment. But 2 days prior to the time of this event, he paid to restart the service. And guess what they found in the bedroom when they finally got in there, class? 2 dead bodies. Carrie and Lexi were lying there dead in their bed. See, the question when you're a detective is, can I answer how there's 2 dead people here by staying inside the room? In other words, is there a natural reason for explaining this? And so they began their investigation, and when they figured out all these things, they declared it a homicide. And may I tell you, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, Todd was convicted of first-degree murder of his own wife and daughter. Nobody saw the murder. There were no witnesses. The overwhelming circumstantial evidence convicted him of murder. And what he goes on to say is, for the natural world, class, the piling up of circumstantial evidence is so powerful, any reasonable person would have to say, I give up. Somebody designed this. We were compelled to examine the evidence of tampering. That's the title of this chapter. Because of one important fact, there were 2 dead bodies on the crime scene. In a similar way, when we look at the nature of our universe, there exists living bodies that ought to provoke investigation. How'd we get here? And like our murder scene, there are foundational, regional, and locational conditions demanding explanation. So he proceeds to go through those lines of evidence. So jury, the first thing we'd say is Todd already threatened to kill her. And they had another big argument the night before all this happened. What do you think? And he would pile it on. And then proceed line after line through the evidence. We're going to do the same thing. The laws of nature, the physical constants and ratios, the properties of the elements, the properties of the chemicals, they're on that 600 dial thing I told you about. And they are so finely tuned, class, you won't even believe it. So let me talk about one of them. Laws of nature, right here. You know, Isaac Newton discovered the universal law of gravity. If I had time tonight, I would derive the mathematical formula for you. You've probably seen it. The force of gravity equals G, which is the gravitational constant, times the mass of one object times the mass of the other object divided by the distance between them squared. You seen this before? It's called the inverse square law. He discovered that. And it is absolutely a mathematical description of the way nature works. Class, the question is, why does nature work mathematically? Why is that? And everywhere you look, it's that way. And that mathematical law, which Newton discovered in 1687, you can use in 2025 to send a spaceship to Pluto. What did he know about spaceships? Nothing, but his law predicts the way nature behaves. Looks like a design, class. And here's an interesting fact. If you change the gravitational constant, that G that I told you about, if you change that factor by less than 1 times 10 to the 34th power, this universe wouldn't be here. 10 to the 31st power? You don't have any idea how big that is. But if you had one little piece, if you took one piece out of 10 to the 31st and changed it that much, that's not 1 billion, folks. That's 1 billion, million. I can't even write it. But you change that dial just that much. This is the law of universal gravitation. You wouldn't be here. That's just one. And I'm telling you, there are hundreds of others just like it. Do we have time to do all this? No, class, that's why you're going to come back to my class and we're going to study this for 6 weeks. I'm kidding. But I'm not kidding that that's the case. So we're calling those foundational fine-tuned factors. What was a foundational factor in the case of Todd's murder? He was a horrible person and he hated his own wife. Wasn't that foundational? That has something to do with this. Well, these factors here are foundational for the whole universe. The universe wouldn't exist if these weren't, say it.
Just right.
You almost got it. But let's go to regional. How about where we live here in our region? We live in a galaxy, don't we? We call it what? Our galaxy. The Milky Way galaxy. Kids, you know why we call it the Milky Way? Because if you got ever to go outside and you could really see the sky instead of here where you can't see anything because it's so light, you would see this milky thing going across the sky. And it's the edge of our galaxy with thousands and thousands of stars. But folks, do you think a living system like ours on an Earth around a sun can just exist anywhere in the galaxy? If you do, you're wrong. It can't be just any kind of galaxy. The James Webb Telescope has told us a lot. It was put up in the sky in 2022. You remember this? Now, all of you were alive then. Well, there's one or two who were alive. But you remember about the James Webb Telescope? What I'm about to show you is the first picture taken by that telescope that was revealed to the public. Our president revealed it. And I'm going to show you what we learned from that picture. But first, I want to read you the NASA statement about this. Are you staying awake? All right. The image I'm about to show you, everybody look up here at me. The image I'm about to show you, if you took a grain of sand and put it between your fingers and held it out here at arm's length, the amount of the sky that grain of sand would block out is what you're going to be looking at on this picture. Did I make that clear? Is that a little teensy piece of the universe? It's that much of the universe you're going to be looking at that the James Webb Telescope opened up to us. We'd never seen it before. Is that clear? I want this to be dramatic. All right, so to make it more dramatic, we're going to turn the lights off so you can actually see better the thing they showed us in this picture. So go. Is that incredible? Remember, that's that one little grain of sand, that's what it blocked off that we'd never seen before. Let me try this stupid pointer again. All right, you see that right there? And that, and that, and that, and that. All those big things. Isn't that amazing how many additional stars there are? Class, what you don't understand is almost all of those blotches are galaxies, not stars. Did you hear me? You should have said, oh. Oh. Yeah, thank you. Let's look at it a little more closely. Can you see this one right here? That's a spiral galaxy, class. See it? That one there is a elliptical. These three down here are elliptical. There's not very many spirals. You see that one right there? Come on, hold still. What's that doing, Troy? Is that making a mess of that?
It's just slightly delayed.
Okay, that's another spiral galaxy. There's a bunch of galaxies. Did you know that one of those galaxies probably has 300 billion stars in it? The name of this picture is the Galaxy Cluster, SMACS 0723. It smacks like a big deal to me. Folks, we have lots of galaxies. Let me ask you another question. This is not a just right question. Should you be surprised there are lots of stars if you're a Bible believer? Of course not. Because it uses that illustration, doesn't it? Of uncountable. And yet the Bible says He knows the names of every one of them. That's the God I want to believe in. But here's fact right here. So, could just any one of those galaxies be where our solar system is located and we have life like we have it? And the answer is an absolute no. Now let's get the lights back on. There are three basic types of galaxies: the elliptical, the irregular, and the spiral. There are other categories. You could talk about them in a lot of different ways. But those are the three basic categories. And everybody knows that a living system like ours around a solar system would have to be in a spiral galaxy. Forget the others, because there's too many forces working against you. I don't think you got that. We just eliminated a whole host of all the stars in the universe based on what we know, not what we don't know. So it has to be elliptical. That's not good enough. The location in the galaxy is important also. So here, look at the side of that galaxy. This is a elliptical galaxy, a spiral galaxy. But spiral galaxies have this big blob in the middle. And if our sun was right in there, you wouldn't be here. There are so many forces working against you in that middle piece of that galaxy, you wouldn't be here. There would be no living system around any kind of a sun. Don't believe me, you go read about it yourself. I'm telling you, we don't disagree on this. So where does it have to be? Well, here's the areas. About 1/150th of the total volume of that galaxy will work for a living system like we have, that we happen to live on. So jury, here's how I deal with you. Isn't that an interesting coincidence? Where do you think our sun happens to be? Right there. Isn't it interesting that it happens to be right in the livable space in that particular spiral galaxy? It's a nice coincidence, isn't it? Well, see, those coincidences just pile up. They pile up. It has to be an elliptical. Second, it has to be in 1/150th of the space of that elliptical. We know this because of the conditions in the galaxies. And then, you think that's enough? No, you got to have the right kind of star. You think just any old star will do, folks? The answer to that is no. It has to be
Just right.
Yeah. So, our sun's pretty good size compared to the planets. See all these planets down here? The sun's way bigger than they are, but look at this. Our sun over there, compared to Sirius and Pollux and Arcturus, is rather small. Wouldn't you agree? These are relative sizes here. But I'm not done. What about this? Here's Antares and Betelgeuse and Aldebaran and Rigel and Arcturus. And where's our sun? Right there. Can you see it? No, you cannot. Don't tell me you can see it. I can't see it from up here. It's a size of 1 pixel compared to this guy. Folks, there are lots of stars way bigger than our sun. Did you also know, class, there are lots of stars way smaller than our sun? There are. They're called dwarfs. Lots of them. So our sun just happens to be...
Just right.
That was way too weak, class. You got to get enthusiastic here. Our sun was...
Just right.
And it is...
Just right.
Not just in size, but in temperature, in radiation, in a host of other factors that add up to about 40 that are all
Just right.
to support a living system on a planet. Oh. I'm telling you, don't believe me. I'm quoting things that everybody knows who's in the study of this. You think the right kind of star is enough? No. You got to have the right kind of planet, and it's got to be located correctly. You think just any old planet will do? How about Jupiter for life? Forget it. You couldn't survive 2 milliseconds on Jupiter. So here are our planets in our solar system. How many of these have life on them? As we know right now, 1. There it is. Come on, pointer. There we go. Why am I doing it? You see why I hate this? Poof. That one has life on it. You know why these guys don't have any life on them? There's so many features. They're too big. The gravitational force is incredible, and they can't support water in the liquid state. Are you kidding? You can't have life without water. Nor can you have it without certain carbon substances. You're not getting any of that on these planets. What's the next biggest one down here? What's that one? Say, did anybody know? No, Mars is this one. Venus is the closest one to us. Anybody looking for life on Venus? Have you ever heard of any NASA programs to go to Venus? Anybody know why? Because it's a dumb planet. It rotates backwards. And its rotation is not appropriate. And its atmosphere is mostly sulfuric acid. And the temperature ranges somewhere close to 900 degrees. There is no life on Venus. So we're looking on Mars because of what? What are they looking for on Mars that suggests there might be life? Water. Class, if you were in my chemistry class, we would spend 6 weeks on water. It's the most incredible substance in the universe. And it continues to be the most studied substance. We still don't know all there is to know about water. But I'll tell you one thing we know for sure. There is no living thing that could survive without water. And we are 70% covered with water on this planet. And if they found any on Mars, I don't know it. They think they have some evidence of it. And this one, what's this next smallest? Mercury. And Pluto, of course, is a planet, right? Did you know there was a mission to Pluto? I'm going to talk about that Sunday night. All right. Out of these, there's only one. Certainly one that we know of. And you know where we're located? In what's called the habitable zone around the sun. You have to be in a certain distance from a sun to be able to have life. And that's where the Earth fits. It's another one of those amazing coincidences. And then you have to have the proper mass, spin, tilt, moon, atmosphere. We could spend 6 weeks on the moon. We have one. You know you wouldn't be here without that appropriate moon. There would be no life on this earth without the appropriate moon. There's all kinds of reasons for that. the atmosphere, the crust, etc. Biochemicals, the genetic code, molecular machines, all of those things we're going to talk about a little bit tomorrow. And every one of them has to be
Just right.
They do. And the one cell, are you kidding? When Darwin was alive, you know what they thought of a cell? A little simple albumin of carbon. Just a blob. Could have certainly originated naturally. Look at what we've learned. And we're looking at things on the level of nano. 10 to the 9th meters, that's 1/billionth of a meter. That's the size of cells and their things that are in it. And did you know, class, we've got engineers working at that level now? We do. I want to introduce you to one. His name is James Tour. He's a nano engineer at Rice University. He's done amazing things with nano engineering. I'm going to tell you one. The man has, I think, 150 patents. He and his crew have started several companies. He's applied it to the medical profession. Here's one that he's done. He's helped with graphene. Graphene is a layer of carbon 1 atom thick. How in the world do you do that? And they've made a layer of carbon 1 layer thick that you can use. And here's an experiment he ran. He took a little mouse like this, kids, and he severed his spinal cord. That's not a good thing to do. And in between where he severed it, he put graphene and some chemicals that were specifically chosen, sewed it back up, and turned the little guy loose in his cage. And in about 20 some odd days, he was almost back to normal. So somehow or another, that graphene helped to knit that stuff back together. A nerve of, your spinal cord is pretty complex. Somehow that worked. I don't think anybody knows exactly yet how, but I'm telling you, there's all kinds of things going on at the nano level. And what we're learning is down there at that level, things also have to be
Just right.
exactly right. So any reasonable person that's working at the nano level wants to build a nano car. So he has. Here's his first nano car. Let's see if I can get this to work. This is one molecule, folks. You see the wheels, the axles, the drive shaft. You make this thing rotate by shining light on it or getting chemicals to touch it. And when it rotates, it moves those wheels. So you can have a little car that rolls along. Made out of 1 atom. Is that possible? It's not only possible, they're doing it now. And of course, when you have a car, what are you going to do with it? You're going to have a race. Isn't that right, kids? I mean, you got to race the car. So, the first International Nano Car Race, April 28th and 29th, 2017 in Toulouse, France. It was done with computers, and the teams were from Austria, US. Here's the Rice University team. That's Dr. Tour's team. France, Germany, Japan, Switzerland, and another US university. 6 teams, and they had a race. And I'm so pleased to announce to you that the Rice University and Austria team won because their little car went 150 nanometers in 1.5 hours. Remember how big a nanometer is? 1/billionth of a meter? They went 150 of those in an hour and a half. Now, folks, at the nano level, that's whipping along. The next closest one was Switzerland, who went 133 nanometers in 6.5 hours, and everybody else gave up. So is it hard to make a nano car that works? It is. And I'm putting this at the end of this lecture for a reason, class. You watch. This car that they built, here's the first generation of it. It went 1.8 revolutions per hour at 60 degrees. 1.8 times in an hour. That's going to go nowhere. So they started over and built another one. This is their second generation car. What you won't note, probably, is there's only one difference between this one and that one. But when that one didn't work, they started over, class. They used some of the stuff they'd learned, but they started over. And they ended up with a new car that on this rotor here had that sulfur missing. You see that sulfur right there? It's missing right here. That's the only difference. And this one went 3 million revolutions per second and won the race. Wonder how you think that happened. An engineer did that. An engineer did that. Here's what Dr. Tour says about it. The nano cars built by Rice University team were much smaller and far less complex than the Kinesin and Dynein walkers and other molecular machines common in every living cell. In other words, my little car is nothing compared to what's going on in every living cell. Nothing. Second, the Rice team's been working on nanocores for over 20 years. Class. Third, every molecular machine in living cells is much larger, at least 10,000 times, much more complex and much more sophisticated. This is the expert talking. We ain't done nothing, am I put in common English? Compared to what nature is already doing. Here's a taste, class, of how much work and intelligence it took to produce that nano car. You better wake up and listen. Look up here, class. Everybody's eyes should be on this screen. When he won that race, everybody else in the race said, "Are you going to write up what you've learned?" He said, "I already have." And he sent them the publication. I'm going to show you some of that publication. You ready? This is page 1. I'll give you a minute to read that. You see what it says? Details of one molecule characterization. That car was made out of one molecule. And this is what it took. And this is page 2, if you want to see that. That's very helpful, isn't it? And what you don't know, class, is that's the first 2 pages of 281 pages in his article in Tetrahedron magazine that he provided to all those other people, because scientists are nice enough to share what they've learned. Of course, it wouldn't do you a bit of good. But I'm telling you, class, it took a massive amount of intelligence and hard work and repetition to make something that would work like that is nothing compared to what I'm going to talk to you about tomorrow. We know nano cars were designed by intelligent human engineers, do we not, class? There's no question about that. So wouldn't you agree that it's reasonable that living cells with thousands of nano machines, which are much more intricate, complex, interdependent, full of digital information, were surely designed by something? I refer to him as God. And he must have such a massive intelligence. It's beyond comprehension. Because we haven't touched what he's already done. Examining things in nature, are science and belief in God and the Christian religion in conflict? No. Christianity says you examine nature, you're going to see God. Does it not? Romans 1, Psalm 19. And science shows us that everywhere we look, from the macroscopic to the microscopic, things look like they are made. We see evidence of grand design, says Michael Behe in his wonderful book, Darwin's Black Box. Get the 2nd edition, class, because it's 10 years later and there's a whole lot more new stuff. And it's better than ever. No, class. Is it reasonable to believe in God in this scientific age? It's never been more reasonable in the history of all mankind. And that's my lecture. Yeah, it's okay to clap in this setting. And I went way too long, but you stayed with me. I didn't see a single nod off. Good for you. A for attention. Thank you. I'm done. Till tomorrow.